Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well today. So I've had a few requests to show you how to do these mountainous snow bases that I use for my Space Wolves army. So I thought in between projects I'd just put a quick video together today just to show you the process of how I do it and how I get these painted and ready for the gaming table. Pretty simple, but I think they look great. They add so much atmosphere. On a quick note, thank you so much for the support so far on the channel. It's been really lovely reading your comments, and thank you for the feedback. I love making these videos for everyone, so I do really appreciate the kind words that have been left in the comments. But without further ado, let's get to base building. So for this tutorial, we're just going to be using a 32mm base. Obviously, if you're doing a hero or a character model, you're going to be using a larger base, which means you've got more room to work with. So definitely play around with elevation there and take it up a few notches. But we're just going to use a 32mm base, which is a fairly small size to work with, but I'm going to show you how we can get the most out of it. So some of the things we're going to use today, one of which is milliput. So this is a 2-part epoxy putty. So it comes in 2 pieces basically. When mixed together it turns hard to clay in about an hour or 2. I've got some assortment of kind of like slate pieces in various sizes. I've got a couple of these little pots here. You can get these off Amazon or any good hobby store or shop. I've got my mix of gravel, small stones and pebbles that I've accumulated and mixed together over the years. We're going to be using dry ground from AK just to tie everything together, which is my favorite texture paste. We're also going to be using snow from AK. This is just a snow paste, and this is going to be applied at the end. Snow balloons, which are just going to give the illusion of it being soft snow, and then ice sparkles, also from AK, which just gives a little bit of a sparkly sheen to some of the snow texture. It makes it look like it's kind of melting a little bit. The only other thing we're going to be using today is a bit of cork, just to create a bit of initial elevation, and some grass tufts. All the paints that we're going to be using are going to be linked in the description. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Let's get to it. All right, so the first thing we're going to be doing is just building a bit of elevation with some of this cork. So what I'm going to do is tear off a chunk that's going to cover about 2/3 of the base. And the reason I'm only going to cover about 2/3 of the base will come apparent in the next step. But I basically don't want to cover the whole base and leave no space for these larger rocks and milliput. So I'm just going to tear off a chunk that I think is going to be a good size. So I'd say that one's just a little bit big, so I'm just going to break off the end. But I actually want it to overhang slightly as well. I think it looks great. So I think that's a pretty good size. So I'm just going to stick this down with a quick bit of super glue and get that in place. And as you can see, I'm kind of coming up to the edge of the base, just slightly over, but I'm leaving this little gap here where we're going to push some large slate pieces into milliput to secure it, and they're going to be kind of like the backdrop of the base as we start to build this up. So next step now, I am just going to take some more super glue and add a layer to the side and a little bit on top too. And simply all I'm going to do is take the milliput, which, as I said, once mixed together, you need to make sure there's no streaks in the milliput, otherwise it won't set correctly. And I'm just going to start tearing pieces off. And again, no need to be neat here because it's got to look like rough ground and earth anyway. And I'm going to start just filling in that gap on that one side there. I'm also going to place a little bit on top where we've just previously put that super glue, just like so. Okay, so looks a bit messy for now, but trust the process because it will look fantastic in the end. Okay, so once you've done that, you've got the beginnings of our base. So the next stage here is that I'm going to be taking some of this slate. So I found this nice kind of flat piece here, and I'm just going to kind of position it off on the side of the base. So I'm going to just super glue the bottom half so it sticks nicely into the putty, and I'm just going to press this right in like so. And I'm just going to make sure that that's secured around the back, but we don't want too much actually hanging over the bottom of the base. The other thing I'm going to do is just kind of flatten out the top, just so it's nice and even for when you place your model on there, but just like that is perfect. The next thing I'm going to do is just take a couple of smaller kind of slate pieces and just do the same thing. I'm just going to add a little bit of super glue, figure out where kind of looks cool to me. I might have a little bit more kind of into this portion here, just sticking out slightly. Okay, just like so. All right, if you wanted to add more, you can, but I'm also going to take some different size rocks and just start to build up a little bit of interest now next to the slate pieces that we've just pressed in. So I'm just adding a bit of super glue, adding some rocks, some larger ones. We'll come back after we have applied the texture paint to add some fine grains and sand, but we're just putting the bigger, more focal rocks and slate pieces in first. So I'll just finish getting this base ready for the next step, and then we'll continue on. Okay, and I've just attached this to a bit of cork to make it easy to work with, so just secured by blue tack. But once you've done that, it should look something like this. So I like to place the rocks next to the bigger rocks, just to make it look a bit more organic, but however you prefer to do it is fine and up to you. So next thing, we're just going to be using this AK custard, aka dry ground, and we're going to be applying this with an old brush, just scooping a bit out and starting to build up texture in and around the rocks that we've already added. So just working around the model. We will also hit some of the cork and also around the back of the stone piece here. Now, if you do happen to get a bit on the base like that, you can just quickly come in with your finger and just simply wipe it away. But slowly work your way around the model. This is just a good opportunity to fill any gaps too. On the back here, I'm just going to have the texture paint just come up the back of the rock just slightly, just to tie it in a little bit with the base. But here, just have fun with this process. I love applying texture paste. I think it's just a therapeutic step of the process. So we'll go around this whole base, get the texture paste applied, and then we'll come in and start adding the small sand and gravel. All right, and with that done, you should have something that looks a bit like this. So looks a bit messy, but that's okay. It's meant to look organic. It's meant to look like real ground, so we don't want any symmetry anywhere really. I'm just going to bring in some of my mix here, and all I'm going to do while the AK dry ground is still wet, I'm just going to sprinkle a bit of this just across the whole base as well, including behind that large piece that we've kind of jammed in there, and making sure I'm hitting all the sides to add a little bit of extra interest and texture. We're also going to add some tufts now before we prime this, because we're actually going to paint the tufts and cover the majority of this model in snow. So it's not too much of a problem if you want to put on the tufts last if you prefer to, but I like to just get them on the base now so that I can actually paint them when we come to priming and painting the model to finish it. So I'm just going to put these tufts in a select few places where I think they look best. Obviously, if you don't want to use tufts, that's absolutely fine as well. This is just preference, but I really want this base to look like kind of like this highland mountainous area that's being traversed. So I like to try and chuck a few of these tufts in and around the points in which there's lots of rocks, just to tie it in with the base a little bit. And I've also got these very small tufts which I like to use too, and they just add a little bit of extra visual interest. And I like to put these just kind of around rocks and things like that, just as if there's moss and things, or whatever, lichen or whatever it is that grows off these pieces of rock. Okay, don't need to add too much, just until you feel like you've got the look that you want. I think that's pretty good. I don't think there needs to be anything extra there. And all I'm going to do to finish is seal the base, and this is simply just a little pot of PVA and water, about 50-50. I've just mixed and given a shake, so I've got this kind of liquid PVA now that I can use as a bit of a setter for everything that's currently on there. So because it's majority water, I'm just going to put a few drops on. It'll kind of spread into all the recesses itself, but the majority of this will simply evaporate and you'll just be left with the PVA glue. So even though it looks like it's going on quite thick, the end result is actually just the glue remains, and it seals everything nice and tight to the base, so you don't have to worry about things falling off when we come to the next stage. So I'm just going to go away now and allow this to dry. It will take a couple of hours, and then when we come back we'll prime the whole base black and we can get to painting. Okay, so I let the whole base dry overnight, though as I said, you could probably leave it for a couple of hours and it would be fine to carry on painting. I've primed it black, and we've got a result that looks like this. Okay, so the color scheme is fairly simple, muted. I'm just going to start off with AK grey brown, and we're basically just going to be hitting it from below and around the center to where most of those earthy tones need to be. So I'm just going to take my time going around the model, hitting a little bit of the back of this big rock that we've got here as well, and just getting that brown tone established where there's going to be mud and earth and ground predominantly on this base. Now you can pretty much hit a bit of everything at this stage, because we are going to come back over the top with our next colour, and when we just finish this with a bit of oil, it's going to blend everything together. Okay, so we've established our earthy ground tones. The next thing we're going to do is come in with a dark grey and just hit all the stone elements. So again, not super important to be precise, because we are going to blend this together with some oils, but we want to make sure that all the stone elements are covered in a nice opaque layer of this dark grey. Like so. Okay, and all those stone elements are now covered in a dark grey. I'm just going to add a little bit of ice yellow to that previous dark grey mix and just highlight up some of the rocks to draw a little bit more interest. I'm kind of aiming towards the tips of the rocks, just to draw the eye and create a bit more definition. Okay, and with that highlight color applied, your rock should look like this. Now, I wanted to push myself a little bit further for this tutorial, just to give you maybe some ideas of what you could possibly do. I have a Space Wolves army, so I just thought it'd be cool to imagine that this big piece of rock used to be some sort of rune stone, and I've taken a few decals from the Space Wolves decal set, and I've just added those to the stone, and then I've just applied some sponge chipping over the top to blend it in with some dark grey. So very simple step, as I said, completely optional depending on what kind of force that you're putting together, but I just thought it'd be cool to show you something different. So next we're just going to re-establish the greens on the plants and also up on the rocks a little bit, like they've been in moist ground, and moss has started to grow over them. So for this we're going to be using olive green by AK. It's quite a bright green, but as I said, we are going to knock this back with some oils at a later stage. And with that stage done, you have something that looks like this. So again, I've gone over the rocks with a little bit of the green just below them there, just to show they've been in kind of damp, muddy ground for a long period of time, and kind of moss and things have started to grow up them. Obviously it looks pretty messy at this stage, but that's okay because we're going to use some burnt umber oil paint from Aptilong 502, and we're just going to now start defining all these parts of the base. So I'm going to apply this pretty liberally and pretty thin all over the base, including the big rock. So for example, I'm just going to come down from the top of the rock here, and where I don't want too much building up, I'm just going to simply take my thumb and drag my thumb across just to clear a bit of that oil from the top. Where there's a bit more of a tide mark, say at the top here, I don't want that so much, so I'm just going to dry off my brush, and I'm just going to feather the top of the oil there, just so we don't get such a harsh line between where I rub the oil off and where the oil starts again. So go around the whole model. It's about look and feel here, so trying to hit the rocks, but then keeping a little bit that's not covered in the oil as much, just so you still have those points of interest. And yeah, we'll come back to the next step once that's complete. Okay, I've gone away, had a cup of tea, let the oil dry, and I've just come in. I've painted the rim black using AK black, and then I've given it a quick light coat of ultra matte varnish just to seal the base and blend everything together. Okay. Now next stage is we're going to be using this diorama effect snow from AK. It's this kind of toothpaste, but we're just going to be taking a little bit of some of this on an old brush, and I'm just going to start applying this to the base. Now I don't want to completely cover everything that I've done so far, so I'm just going to take my time and select a few places where I think snow and this kind of tundra would settle in. I'm going to kind of brush the tops of the tufts here, just to show that the snow is kind of catching in those, and also build up a little bit of contrast and a bit of awareness that there is actually some sort of plant life on the base as well. But take your time with this, have fun. I like to try and put a little bit around the big rocks as well, but yeah, it just depends on how much of the original base you want showing through, which is why in the earlier stages it's not too much of a problem if you're not super neat, because we just want it to read as earth. So yeah, go around the base and have some fun with this step, and then we'll just finish off with some last little diorama effects to really bring this home before we're finished. All right, and once you've applied that snow texture paste, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. I like to cap the tops of the larger stones with a bit of a heavier snow drift, but kind of highlight around the sides. As you can see, like there's quite a lot of the base now covered, so it's why it's not so important to be super neat and accurate with those base coats. You just want the ground to read as muddy, wet ground, really. So all we're going to do while this snow effect is still wet, we're going to take something called micro balloons. So this stuff is, try not to breathe it in. It's very, very light, and it can go everywhere. So I'm just going to take a little bit of a pinch of this with my finger, and it's kind of like this very fine, fluffy powder. But what this is going to do on the base is it's just going to give the illusion that this is a bit more of a fresh snowfall. And I'm going to apply pretty liberally just on top of where I have put the majority of that snow paste, like so. As I said, don't worry about being too messy at this stage, because we're going to just give this a bit of a dust off once we're done. So that's as much as I want on there, but you can see it just kind of makes the snow now look a little bit kind of dusty, like a fresh snowfall. I'm just going to take this outside and just blow off the excess, because I don't want to do it in my study, because as I said, you don't want to breathe this stuff in and it can go everywhere. So as soon as I've done that, I'll come back and we'll apply the last diorama effect. Okay, so I've given that a quick dust off and we're left with this result. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some ice sprinkles. So I'm not going to take too many of these. It's a bit of a thicker powder than the micro balloons. And I'm just going to sprinkle this on top of the base as well, just to add a bit of sparkle when it catches the light, to show that this is fresh, icy snow. Okay, and once that's done, I've simply sealed with Vallejo satin varnish to finish, just so you still get a bit of that shine and sparkle from the snow effects. But I think it just ties everything together and also seals in those effects, so it's not going to rub off or fall off if you're using these as a gaming piece. And I think the result is really cool. Definitely looks like kind of mountainous terrain. I'm just going to pop a model on the base so you can see it as it would look once you've got a miniature there. But yeah, I think the result's really nice, and it doesn't take too long to put these bases together. Okay, and with my miniature now attached, I think he looks wonderful. So all I've done is tie his feet in with the base using a little bit of that snow texture paste again. I have added some autumn leaves. It's awesome leaf litter from Green Stuff World. I love this stuff, but you can get lots of replicas on Amazon for dirt cheap. But I think they just add a bit of pop of colour to the base, which I really, really love. I do add a little bit of the snow paste and some micro balloons to the shoulders of my Marines, just to again make it seem like they've been trudging through some freshly fallen snow. I just love the effect that it gives. But yeah, I hope you've learned something today. I hope you found this useful. Again, thank you so much for the support so far on the channel, and please feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you think. I do try and read them all, and I love the feedback that I get down there, so thank you very much. I look forward to getting the next video out to you very soon. But yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.